Well, it's 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, and here I am, Leslie Rogalski, Creative Director for the Beadsmith, with another Facebook Live. Now, I had teased you with a picture of a beachy scene with my little beaded anklet. I mean, after all, summer is the time for bare legs, right? So, here's the thing with making these little anklets. The threads, Eslon for instance, that are available in all these great colors, it's hard to string your beads on them. You can try to do it one at a time, but usually the ends of them start to fray. If you put it on a needle, sometimes you can't get the needle through your bead, or you can't get two pieces of thread through at the same time. So this Facebook Live is going to show you 2 stages using a special tool to help you to string your beads without a needle. I know I have a needle here, that's for later. Okay, cool product that I want to introduce you to called Instaneedle, and what it does is turn the end of your thread into a needle so that it's nice and stiff and you clip it to a point. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. You have a primer and the sealer. They come with sealed lids, and you're going to take the lids off. And here's the really cool thing. Oh, first I should tell you, do you see how I have a paper on my surface? Because this stuff does have a little bit of a toxic level, and it's a very serious bonding agent, so you don't want to spill it. Okay, so I took the lid off my primer, and now I have another lid that has a squeezable tip to it, and I'm going to put that on my primer, close that up. I'm going to do the same thing with the bonder, and I'm going to take the lid off. Hi everybody who's watching. This will work on all kinds of threads, and actually you can even use it on Fireline, and because Fireline is completely synthetic, you don't even need the primer. You can just dip it in this. So again, I'm going to do a little demo for you on a short piece of thread, and then I'm going to show you how cool it is to be able to string. Okay, so here's a piece of Eslon, and the ends start to fray. The more you try to string it through the beads, you're going to be doing this one at a time. So 3 things to remember: dip it, strip it, and clip it. Dip it. Let's do that first. We're going to dip the end of the thread into the squeezable tip, and you're going to be able to watch and see it go all the way down into the liquid. Then you're going to squeeze the tip and squeegee off the excess and pull it out. Give it a minute or 2 to dry. I'm blowing on the end of mine. Now you're going to do the same thing. So far we have dipped it and stripped it to squeegee off the excess. Now we're going to take that same thread. I give it, a minute to dry. It dries really, really fast. And you're going to dip it into the bonding agent also, just down till you see it in there. Strip it by squeezing the nose. Then you're going to set it aside. Make sure the end that you dipped doesn't touch anything, because it will bond to whatever it touches. So I kind of try to lay it down on something out of the way so that it doesn't really matter. There. All right, it's touching a little bit, but okay. Put the little caps back on. And if you're finished, you're going to replace these caps with the sealed caps again on the primer and the bonding agent of the Instaneedle. So that's stage 1 to use this tool, this Instaneedle, to help you to string the beads easier by turning your thread into a needle. So let's see if I'm gonna show you an end of a thread. So we have dip it, strip it, then when this thread is dry, you're gonna clip it, and you're gonna take probably a little wire snips, and again after it's dry, and you're gonna, let's see, all right, this is pretty dry, the one I just did, nice and stiff, and you're gonna snip the end at an angle to give it the easiest access through your beads, and you're just gonna do a nice snip so you can see how that's kind of mitered. All right, that was my demo. So now I'm gonna bring over the Anklet projects. Here we go. Here's a nice macrame board. I have chosen to put my work on the side that doesn't have the grid that you would normally follow, because these are nice and simple, and I wanted to show you a couple things. So you can see that I have used my thread in 2-hole beads and smaller beads, and I would not be able to do this if it wasn't for the fact that the ends of my thread were already nice and hard. Look, I'm not going to draw blood, don't worry. So again, the Instaneedle just makes it really fast and easy to use your S-line. You can see I have a couple different sizes. So let me show you one way to get started, and then I'm going to show you a few varieties of stringing and a way to end it. So this one here has beads strung on cords, and I'm doing like the Shambhala style where I'm making square knots, there we go, around the beads that are strung on, these are size 6 seed beads, and they're strung on 2 pieces of S-line that I never would have been able to have done quickly and easily if it wasn't for the stiff tip at the end of this thread. So let me show you how I started this with the 4 threads, the 2 in the middle and the 2 on the outside. All right. You'll have to excuse all the ends of threads, but it does get that way. So here's the blue thread, and I'm working with a shorter length, but you want to fold it in half so you have 2 equal lengths. And you're going to leave enough at the end to be able to make your closure. So maybe 4 or 5 inches at least. And we're going to make an overhand knot with the end. But before we pull that knot closed, we're going to thread in the threads that are going to be macrameed. And all you're going to do is put one end through that knot before you close it. Like this, so it's in a loop. And now you're going to pull and make your overhand knot. You have 4 cords, and I'm going to tuck them into one of the grooves at the top of my macrame board with the knot on the back. Wait, I'll bring that into focus in a second. There we go. So I just tuck it into the top here to one of the notches, and I'm ready to start weaving. Let me bring the other piece into focus again, and we will get started with making this anklet. Here it is. All right. So I have the overhand knot with the 4 threads connected, and I'm hooking it up into one of the top notches. Top notch. Now I have pre-strung a bunch of my 6s on the middle blue cord. Both ends have been dipped, stripped, and clipped in the Instaneedle. So when you string beads like this, it may be that on a heavier weight S-line like this, you won't be able to get both clipped ends through the beads at once, because where it's coated is going to be a little heavier than where it's not. So just do one at a time. Pull the bead down past the dipped part to a soft area, and then thread on the other dipped part. And just work it down and pull all your threads through, and you have more beads, so you can pre-string like that. Now this macrame that I'm doing is a very basic kind of a stitch. It's just, oh, well, I shouldn't say just, it's square knots. This is a primary knot when you're learning how to knot. Okay, let's see if I can get this a little closer. So I brought my new bead up to the ones I've done, and now I'm only knotting with the green threads. The blue threads are the ones that the beads are on. They're going to stay locked into the board to help me out. So this is a left over right, right over left kind of a knot. And I'm doing it around the bead. I'm going to make what looks like a number 4. So I have pulled my left one over the blue cords, and my right one is coming down over the left. Now I'm going to take this cord and bring it, that's the right cord that's going over the left cord, and I'm going to bring this cord underneath the blue center cords and out through this loop. I'm going to find my end, and I'm going to hold this in place to make it easier for you to see. I have very long threads because an anklet is going to be longer than a bracelet. All right, so here's the end. This is coming over the green. I'm going to bring it under the blue in the middle and through the loop. Pull it through. Do you see how that works there? And the bead sits in the middle of the knot. Now when you look at the square knots, I'm going to bring my camera up closer. When you make a square knot, you have one side of the thread is now coming out over, and the other thread is going under. So with the thread that's coming out on top, on over, you're going to make that 4 again, no bead this time. This is a backwards one. See, now the left is over the right, which is crossing over, and I'm going to bring that thread under the blue and through the loop to make a square knot around the blue. Now the right thread is coming out from over top from the square knot. That's the next one that goes over when you make your 4. Over the left thread, under the blue, through the loop. So I have made 2 hitches after my little bead. My pattern calls for 3. Now I'm going to make my 4 on the other side, left thread over, bring it under the blue, through the loop. And do you see how I'm holding these 2 blue threads so they stay side by side and they don't twist? And that's what you want to do. Time for another bead to come up. My thread is coming out from the right side over the top, so I'm going to make that 4, bring it under the blue, through the loop. Now it's coming out on the left side. Make your 4, bring the left thread underneath and through the loop, and you're just going to keep continuing to do that for as long as you need your anklet. Now the length that you're doing for what would be the blue threads is going to fit around your ankle or your wrist, but leave room for the closure. So in my case, my length for an anklet is about 10 inches. Here we go. In case you're wondering, I don't have a lot of room to work here. Okay, so we can see but wait, you're saying, I hear you saying, that looks different than the pattern. It is. Here's what I've done with this pattern, just as a difference before we get to the closure. Instead of stringing beads on the center, I have strung beads on the threads that I'm doing the macrame with instead, and it makes this really nice little edging. So you would string your beads on these threads. Now, can you do both? Of course. But you do the same thing even with this method in terms of making the 4 and making your square knots. Now I want to show you before we get to the little closure, which is doing exactly what I showed you on a different part, is it's just so cool that by having the ends of your thread dipped into the Instaneedle, you're able to do stuff that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Like with these 2-hole beads with our gem duos, I was able to get the threads through without the Instaneedle, but gosh, they started to fray on the ends, and you have to literally like pick one up and put it through each hole. And by having the Instaneedle, that's that harder tip, it just makes it so much easier for you to string, because you can pick the beads up like you would if you were working on a bead mat, and it just goes right through. Real easy like this. So in this pattern, you can see that I've just played around with stringing gem duos with size 8s in between on each thread, and I'm not doing any of the square knots yet. I'm just stringing beads. I have a really cool little extra little variety in it where I've strung 2 11s and a 6 instead of the gem duos. But you can see how much variety you can get. Now I started this bracelet different, this anklet, by making a lark's head on a closed jump ring. So when I'm finished with this bracelet, I can tie the end off onto a lobster clasp and be able to have kind of a little less folksy, beachy closure to a bracelet. And it would be nice and clean just to have that kind of an ending. All right, last thing, I'm going to clear the board off and show you how to do the macrame closure. Here's my green and purple anklet, and I have twisted the ends off and knotted them off. Now what you're going to do, so these are the green cords that were macramed. I've made an overhand knot and clipped off the threads that were macramed was the purple. Can you see the square knots in between there? My bad. The green is what's being macrameed around. So you're going to take your ends and you're going to lay them side by side like this. Then you're going to take whatever color you want to do your closure, and to make the adjustable closure, you're going to make a series of square knots just like we just did. So I'm going to start by bringing my knotting cord under both of these ends and making a half hitch, which is like when you tie your shoe. Now the same way that I showed you before, you're going to make the little 4. There's no beads in this, but you're going to bring your cord over, under the middle cords, and through the loop. Get in there. And that completes your first square knot. Now this side is coming out from the top, so that's the next one I'm going to do. And you're going to make your 4 like this, and you're going to bring the thread, this macrame thread, underneath the 2 middle cords and through the loop of the 4. And you're going to do that a couple times, back and forth. I'm going to do that real fast, just to make one more. You know, it's always harder when you're trying to show somebody. Isn't that true, you guys who are watching? Kelly, I'm talking to you. Okay, so you would do this for, an inch or so, and to tie it off, this is where you really do need a needle, because although this is a fabulous thing with the ends being stiff and everything, I'm going to want to pull my ends into the knots that I just made so the ends don't come out. And to do that, I'm going to use an embroidery needle, like a 9, 10, something like that. You can see an embroidery needle has a very large eye, long eye, and it's wider at the end, but embroidery needles aren't very sharp on the ends, so you don't run the risk of piercing your thread. So I'm just going to thread one end of this through my embroidery needle once I'm finished, and carefully I'm going to slide my end up without piercing the thread through all those square knots so that it comes out the other end, and then I'll trim it. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other thread. And I'm going to thread it on my embroidery needle. And I'm going to weave it back through those square knots carefully. See, I'm wiggling it so that it doesn't pierce any of the threads. And I'm going to pull it through. And now you can snip those little threads. Ta-da! And now you have an adjustable closure, because the threads that are twisted, that are not macrameed there, are just sliding through that series of square knots, so you can get it on and off easily. Any questions? This is the key. Instaneedle, Eslon or great cords, all kinds of beads, including fabulous 2-hole beads. 8s, 6s are probably a good size. You can try it with crystal pearls, other rounds, micro spacers. Macrame anklets for the summer on my not very tan yet hand. I'm Leslie Rogalski saying you can find all these products and other quality Beadsmith, beads, tools, and supplies at your favorite bead reseller. Woohoo! Happy summer! I love beads. See ya!